Immortal Technique is one of the most controversial rappers of our time. Most people know him for his track Dance with the Devil, a song that'll make your skin crawl every time you hear it. But what lots of people don't know is that song was so dark because it was a direct reflection of his life. He put all the pain and trauma he endured in life into his music. Despite how rough things were for him, he was able to break through, find success, and later become a big social advocate in the industry. Because of that, today we're diving in to see the full history of hip-hop's most misunderstood rapper, Immortal Technique. How did Immortal Technique first break onto the scene? How did his traumatic childhood shape his life and career, and later on shape one of the darkest songs in history? And lastly, what was it that made him able to find success when everything in his life was setting him up for failure? My name's Poncho, the host of Rap Lore, and we're gonna dive into it right now.
The first weapon is your voice.
Right.
Man, woman, everyone should know that.
Felipe Coronel, also known as Immortal Technique, was born on February 19th of 1978 in Lima, Peru. The time he was born was right before one of the most tumultuous eras in the country's history. In 1980, a communist rebel group called Sendero Luminoso, or Shining Path in English, launched a revolution against the Peruvian government. Their goal was to take control of the country and establish itself as a communist state. But this was not a peaceful protest at all. It was an extraordinarily violent revolution. Some tactics that rebels used to take control of the country were burning voting booths, assassinating local officials, bombing government buildings, and massacring anyone who went against their vision. This insurgence led to constant blackouts in the city, economic turmoil, and an unimaginable loss of life. Due to all the chaos around, young Felipe's family fled the country and resettled in Harlem, New York. This should have been a new start for Felipe, but unfortunately, the move threw him into a whole new set of traumas. Felipe arrived in New York City in the 80s, just when the crack epidemic was starting to boom. Harlem was one of the hardest hit areas, and the neighborhood spiraled into violence and chaos. Immortal Technique was right in the middle of it, which exposed him to the worst of the worst in the city. This environment influenced him in a big way. He began running around with gangs in the area and was constantly involved in fights and street beefs. Despite being in the streets, he did manage to graduate high school and get accepted into Penn State University. However, he wasn't able to leave his violent tendencies behind. While at school, he was involved in a brutal assault of some other students on campus, which led to a year-long prison sentence. Felipe took the time he was locked up to evaluate his life, choices, and who he wanted to be in the world. He'd later come out saying the experience was transformative for him and really helped shape the direction of his future. At the same time, he described it as extremely traumatizing. He saw brutal violence in the prison, and he said seeing it and being unable to do anything about it made him feel helpless. He also spent a bunch of time in the hole, adding to the sense of hopelessness that he felt. But he did make the most of his time. He read books from innovators like Che Guevara and Malcolm X, which laid the foundation for his life and career. He also started writing songs seriously, using it as an outlet for all the craziness going on around him. He got out of prison in 1999 with a fresh perspective, motivation, and a ton of songs to hit the ground running with. Unfortunately for him, his parents blew his whole Penn State fund on lawyers to make sure he didn't have to do more time in prison. His dad then forced him to enroll in a local school called Baruch College if he wanted to stay home, so he went there and studied political science. He also worked whatever odd jobs he could find as someone with a criminal record to put food on the table. At the same time, he began stepping into New York's underground rap scene to build a name for himself. He started by entering freestyle battles around the city like Rocksteady Anniversary and Bragging Rights. His aggressive style and lyrics grabbed people's attention and won him several competitions. He then took the prize money winnings to finance his career. By 2001, he had enough songs and support from the scene to drop his first album, Revolutionary Volume 1. It was an independently released 16-song album that was fully funded by his odd job and battle rap grind. The album didn't end up charting, mainly because he was an unknown rapper releasing independently. However, it did get him a lot of fans in the underground, and it had one song that stood out far beyond the rest, and that track was Dance with the Devil. Dance with the Devil is a 9-minute, 39-second storytelling track about one of the deepest, darkest topics imaginable. It follows the story of a kid named Billy who grew up in a broken home and was desperately seeking power and respect. This led him to start selling drugs, robbing, and eventually seeking out a gang to join. The gang then makes him prove his loyalty by beating and essaying a random woman on the street. They find a woman walking home late at night, then they target, attack, and assault her. The gang then demands Billy kill the woman, but right before he does, he realizes it was his own mother. He reacts by leaping off the roof he was on, and the gang kills his mom and never speaks about it. It ends off with the narrator, Immortal Technique, revealing the story is true because he was there and he essayed his mom too. Now because of that, the devil follows him everywhere he goes. Really eerie stuff. Great storytelling by all measures, but very, very eerie. I was 7 or 8 the first time I heard this, and all I could remember was being scared out of my skin. And for those wondering, no, Immortal Technique did not commit this crime. It is a real story, and he even said if you go to Harlem, he could take you to the building where it happened. He inserted himself into the story to make it more provocative, which very clearly worked. And he also revealed that everyone involved in the actual crime are all dead today.
One of them got hit by a car, another one got killed because he got beef with other people, and they killed his son. They make him come to the funeral, and then they killed him.
He also said it took him a full year to write the track. A whole year. Most artists are not giving their songs that type of care and effort, and it's pretty respectable to be honest. Anyway, Technique used the audience he gained through the album and its sequel, The Revolutionary Volume 2, as a springboard to his next chapter in life, Activism.
There's the working class, and there are the people who control the means of production.
Although most people know him as a rapper, you could argue Immortal Technique's biggest contribution to the culture comes through his activism, and his history with it runs extremely deep. He first got interested in it through reading the books of Che Guevara and Malcolm X in prison. That interest grew deeper in the year he spent studying political science at Baruch College. Once he had money and a buzz around his name, he used it as a megaphone for him to spread his messages of social injustice. His first move was to help build an orphanage and medical center in Afghanistan during the height of the war. He partnered with a human rights organization called Amid International to pull this off. Also, to bring these projects to life, he donated $50,000 of his own money from the sales of his third album, The Third World. This was his most successful project and the only one he had chart on Billboard, and he basically dedicated the whole thing to the war in Afghan. Bro really put his money where his mouth is, and it's a big reason people respect him so much. Next, after the massive 2010 earthquake in Haiti, he flew out to the country to support people on the ground. He donated supplies, helped clean up the city, and put on a free concert for the country with Styles P and Corn Mega. After that was what he did for at-risk youth in the States. Starting in 2011, he routinely visited juvenile prisons around the country to mentor kids. He would go in and talk to them, trying to steer them in a better direction than they were going. But his work with the system didn't stop there. He became one of the loudest voices for immigration rights in the whole country. He constantly advocates for immigrant rights, even going as far to travel to the US-Mexico border to distribute food, water, and necessities to migrants looking for refuge. So in case people were wondering why we didn't get any more music for him, it's because he was busy being a real-life Batman. Despite Technique wearing his heart on his sleeve to protect others, not everyone was supportive of his actions. He found himself in a ton of controversies over the years because of the way he was moving.
Immortal Technique was arrested and jailed early this morning.
The first big controversy he got caught up in was because of his stance on 9/11. Technique had been extremely critical about how our government handled 9/11, so much so that he created a whole song with Mos Def called Bin Laden, where he blatantly called out our government for being behind the attacks.
They funded Al-Qaeda, and now they blame the Muslim religion. Even though Bin Laden was a CIA tactician, they gave him billions of dollars, and they funded his purpose. Fahrenheit 9/11, that's just scratching the surface.
He also sampled Jadakiss's voice saying, "Bush knocked down the towers, it was you, nigga," and it doesn't really get any more blatant than that. He followed that up with another track attacking Bush in 2006 called Impeach the President. Again, another self-explanatory message within the music. This obviously brought backlash towards Technique. He responded to it by encouraging people to do their research and look into what our government has done historically. And that was probably the play from the start. Say outrageous things and get people talking, then encourage them to study what the truth really was. It's kind of genius when you think about it. Despite how savvy this move was, it made the media and critics call Technique a conspiracy theorist and someone who's just all around a problem. And this was just the start of his criticism towards our government. He'd go on to bash Obama, Trump, Biden, and Reagan, along with the whole state of Israel, the ideology of Zionism, the FBI, Wall Street, the Federal Reserve, and many, many, many more. This isn't a political show, so I'm not going to get into all these, but the point is he went at anyone's neck who he felt was pushing marginalized people down. No nobody was off limits. That goes into his next controversy, which is really just his music. His whole discography is controversial. The vast majority of Technique's music is about politics, war, social issues, and activism. All of those are controversial by nature. Then on the few occasions he's not talking about those things, he's talking about the darkest, most dark street horror stories imaginable. I mentioned him being independent a few times in the video already, but this is the real reason why, even more than the financial side. No major label on the planet is going to take a chance with someone rapping about the type of stuff Technique was on. He had no choice but to be indie. Anyway, back to the controversies. Not all of them were just people not liking his words. In 2015, Technique got booked after he and his manager allegedly jumped two guys selling counterfeit merch of him outside one of his shows in Santa Ana, California. Luckily for Technique, the case got thrown out due to insufficient evidence because despite these two dudes getting jumped, neither one of them had any visible injuries on their bodies. This reiterated Technique's belief that people were out to get him and sabotage his character by any means. Despite all this controversy, Immortal Technique stands 10 toes in what he believes in. During a 2012 interview with The Guardian, he outright said, quote, "If you're troubled by the words I speak, then you should probably hang yourself because the world is going to tear you apart or is too real for you to accept." So despite how anyone feels, Technique means what he says and says what he means.
Every country wants a piece of the American pie, but that means you have to co-sign America's lies.
With all that said, that leads to where we are today. First, if you're waiting on the next Immortal Technique drop to happen, you should probably stop waiting. His last single was a collab song with Brother Ali, Killer Mike, and Chuck D that dropped in 2022, and his last official album came out in 2008. However, he is still actively touring. Despite being 48 years old, he's flying around city to city performing and even has some international dates lined up for the fall. And since Technique always stayed independent, he has the type of control over his career that most artists would dream of. He can say and do whatever he wants without anyone stopping him, and that's the real win in this situation. Outside of music, bro is still deeply on his activism grind. During the start of COVID, he founded Rebel Army Runs, a nonprofit that delivers groceries, medicine, and supports elderly and vulnerable people. The organization is based in Harlem, but makes moves all around the country, and their motto on Instagram is "We turn no one away." Despite the program launching 6 years ago, Technique is still very involved with it today. With all that said, that's the full story of hip-hop's most misunderstood rapper, Immortal Technique. Let me know what you think about him and the video in the comments, and if you want to watch another one on New York legends, I just did a full breakdown of the history of the Wu-Tang Clan. Check it out here.